Eli Denton was found barefoot and silent on a lonely Oregon back road, and Deputy Mark Collins was the first to realize this was no ordinary lost child. It was the beginning of a mystery that would unravel a hidden life of obsession, forged identities, and a vanishing woman no one could catch. The night air was sharp and damp, carrying the scent of wet pine as Deputy Mark Collins steered his patrol car along the winding back road. It was the kind of road where headlights barely cut through the darkness, and the forest seemed to swallow sound. He had driven this route hundreds of times, but tonight something caught his eye. A small, unsteady figure emerged from the shadows, barely visible against the tree line. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a stray dog, until the shape stepped into the beam of his headlights. It was a boy no more than 12 years old, barefoot and wearing clothes that looked days past clean. His shirt clung to his thin frame and his pants were caked with mud. Collins slowed the car and rolled to a stop, his mind already racing. Children didn't wander these woods at night, not in this part of Oregon where miles of dense forest stretch between tiny rural towns. The boy didn't react to the bright light or the crunch of gravel under the tires. He just kept walking, one slow, deliberate step after another, as if the cold didn't touch him and the darkness didn't matter. When the deputy opened his door and approached, the boy turned slightly but made no sound. His eyes were distant, focused somewhere beyond the road, as though he was following a path only he could see. The deputy tried speaking to him, keeping his voice low and steady, but the boy gave no response. His lips were cracked and his breathing shallow, yet there was no sign of panic. Collins noticed deep scratches across the boy's arms and a raw scrape on his knee, the kind you get from stumbling through brambles and rocks. His feet, bare and pale, were covered in tiny cuts. He looked like he had been walking for days. The boy's silence wasn't just refusal, it felt like a wall. When Collins gently touched his shoulder, the boy flinched but still said nothing. Realizing the child might be deaf or unable to speak, the deputy guided him toward the warmth of the patrol car. The boy resisted for a moment, his eyes darting toward the woods as if considering escape, but exhaustion won out. Inside the car, he sat stiff and still, staring out the window at the endless dark. There were no tears, no signs of fear, only a heavy emptiness that made the deputy's stomach tighten. Collins radioed dispatch for backup and medical support, describing the boy's condition and the remote location. As he waited, he studied the child for clues. There was no backpack, no coat, no sign of food or water. His clothes were worn but not torn enough to suggest an accident. It was as if he had been carefully stripped of anything that could identify him. Each minute that passed raised more questions. Who was this boy? Where had he come from? And why, in the dead of night, was he walking alone through miles of forest with no sign of where he belonged? At the hospital, the boy was placed in a quiet room away from the noise of the emergency ward. Nurses moved carefully around him, checking his vitals and cleaning the cuts on his feet and arms. He remained silent through it all, watching with wide, alert eyes but giving no indication that he understood their words. Doctors confirmed he was dehydrated and malnourished, though not in immediate danger. His body told the story of long days without proper food or shelter. Sunburned skin hidden under dirt, bruises that had begun to fade, and the faint outline of ribs beneath his shirt. Yet there were no signs of a violent struggle, no obvious injuries that explained how he had ended up alone in the woods. Social workers were brought in quickly, each taking turns to coax even a single word from him. They tried speaking slowly, using simple gestures, and showing pictures of food, water, or family members, but he remained silent. It became clear he either could not speak or chose not to. The absence of a voice only deepened the mystery. Normally, missing children are reported within hours, and hospital staff expected frantic parents to appear the moment his story reached local media. But hours passed, and then a full day, with no calls and no matches on national databases. When they searched his clothing for any clue, they found something small and strange. Tucked inside the sole of his left shoe was a damp, crumpled piece of paper no bigger than a grocery receipt. Written in faint pencil was a single word, Eli. There was no last name, no phone number, no address, just that one name. It was enough to give the boy an identity, but not enough to bring him home. Investigators ran the name through every missing child report they could access. There were Eli's across the state and beyond, but none matched his age, appearance, or situation. Detectives expanded their search outward from the road where he was found. They visited gas stations, diners, and small-town markets along the forest route, carrying a photo of the boy and the mysterious scrap of paper. Most people shook their heads, claiming they had never seen him before. Then a flicker of hope emerged. A clerk at a lonely gas station recalled a brief, unsettling encounter 3 days earlier. He remembered a thin, pale woman in an old blue van stopping for fuel late at night. In the passenger seat sat a boy who looked remarkably like Eli. The woman had kept her head down, paying in cash and leaving quickly. Security cameras confirmed the sighting, but the footage was grainy and the license plates had been removed. Investigators dug deeper, examining every detail in the footage. The woman wore a hooded coat, her face turned away from the camera. The boy never looked up, only stared at his hands in his lap. The timestamp showed it was hours before the first heavy rain of the week, meaning Eli had been wandering in wet, freezing conditions ever since. The discovery of the blue van offered the first real lead, but it also raised new questions. Who was the woman, and why would she drive a child into the middle of nowhere only to vanish without a trace? The search for the blue van stretched into the surrounding countryside, where dense evergreens and winding gravel roads created a maze of possible hideouts. Deputies questioned hunters, hikers, and residents of isolated cabins, but days passed without a single confirmed sighting. Then, on a misty morning, a call came from a hunter who had been scouting deer trails about 10 miles from the spot where Eli was found. He reported faint tapping noises coming from an old farmhouse long abandoned after a fire decades earlier. The property sat hidden behind overgrown brush, its roof sagging and its windows coated in grime. Curious and uneasy, the hunter had ventured close enough to see a narrow set of footprints in the mud leading toward the back door. He didn't dare go inside, but left the site and contacted authorities. Detectives arrived within an hour, moving cautiously through the decaying structure. The smell of damp wood and rusted metal filled the air as flashlights cut through the dim interior. Dust covered most surfaces, but recent footprints disturbed the layer of grime on the floor. The house had clearly been used despite its ruined state. Broken furniture was pushed aside to clear a path toward a heavy door in the kitchen. Behind it, they discovered a set of stairs leading down to a hidden basement. The basement was small and cold, but unmistakable signs of occupancy chilled even the most seasoned officers. Against one wall stood a child-sized mattress covered with a thin blanket. A stack of canned food, half-eaten and rusted from damp air, sat nearby. Empty water jugs leaned in a corner beside a single lantern with a dying battery. Scattered across the floor were small objects. A cracked toy truck, a worn puzzle missing several pieces, and a handful of cheap crayons. These items looked like they had been gathered to comfort a child, not to entertain one. Everything about the room felt deliberate, from the careful placement of supplies to the absence of anything traceable. The most unsettling discovery lay in the center of the basement floor. A faded photograph, bent at the corners and smudged with dirt. The image showed Eli standing next to a man whose face had been violently scratched out with thick black marker. Behind them, a blue van was unmistakable, parked in front of a wooded backdrop that matched the surrounding forest. The photo appeared recent, but there were no dates or markings to confirm when it was taken. The man's identity remained hidden, but his connection to Eli was undeniable. As officers searched the perimeter, one detective noticed a small trapdoor near the far wall. Opening it revealed a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for a single person to crawl through. The passage stretched toward the woods, its dirt floor showing fresh drag marks. Someone had used it recently, perhaps even during the night. It explained how the farmhouse remained unseen despite repeated patrols. Whoever brought Eli here had planned for escape routes and hidden exits, anticipating that someone might eventually come looking. The discovery turned a simple missing child case into something far darker, hinting that Eli had not merely been lost, but deliberately kept out of reach. 3 tense days passed after the discovery of the farmhouse before another lead emerged. Wildlife officers reviewing motion-triggered cameras deep in the national forest captured a fleeting image of a vehicle half-hidden among towering pines. The blurry frame showed the same distinctive blue van investigators had been searching for. Its position suggested it had been deliberately concealed, parked under a tangle of branches and camouflage netting. Deputies and state troopers moved in carefully, fearing that whoever had left the van might still be nearby. When they arrived, the forest was silent, the air heavy with the smell of wet moss and gasoline. The van itself was a chilling sight. Mud splashed across the sides masked its true color, but the distinctive shape and rusted fenders matched the security footage from the gas station. Both license plates were missing, leaving no immediate trace of ownership. The windows were fogged and streaked with sap, but inside they could make out piles of clothing and what looked like cardboard boxes. Officers opened the back doors and were met with a scene that deepened the mystery and unease. Inside were children's clothes in various sizes, neatly folded and stacked in plastic bins. Some appeared new, while others were worn and patched as if salvaged from thrift stores. Among the clothes sat a sealed box containing forged documents, birth certificates, school ID, and medical records, all with different names, but the same set of photographs of a single boy who appeared to be Eli at different ages. The precision of the forgery suggested someone with experience in altering identities, someone determined to keep the child untraceable. A locked metal case beneath the driver's seat held an envelope stuffed with cash, mostly small bills along with maps of state parks and isolated hiking trails marked with red ink. Investigators also found a spiral notebook filled with unsettling notes written in a tight, frantic hand. Phrases like a "keep him safe," a "no hospitals," and a "never again" were repeated over and over across the pages. Each entry carried a different date, but offered no explanation for the obsession. Fingerprint analysis provided the first concrete breakthrough. Prints lifted from the van's steering wheel matched those of a woman named Laura Denton, a former nurse from Idaho. Public records revealed a troubling history. Years earlier, Denton had run an unlicensed care facility for special needs children. The facility was shut down after multiple complaints of neglect and unauthorized treatment, but she vanished before she could be formally charged. For years, she remained off the grid, resurfacing only in scattered reports of odd behavior in small towns across the Northwest. Despite the promising lead, Laura Denton was nowhere to be found. The van showed signs of being abandoned in haste, keys left in the ignition, food wrappers still fresh, and a half-full thermos of coffee. Tracking dogs followed a faint scent trail through the forest, but it ended abruptly near a rushing river swollen by recent rain. It was as if she had stepped off the earth. The discovery of the van confirmed that Eli had not been lost by accident. He had been hidden and moved from place to place by someone who believed she had a reason to disappear, someone who would not easily let go of the child she claimed as her own. Weeks passed before Eli began to reveal fragments of the truth. Communications specialists worked patiently with sign language, pictograms, and simple gestures to break through the wall of silence that surrounded him. At first, his responses were hesitant, a nod here or a small movement of the hands there, but over time patterns began to emerge. Piece by piece, investigators learned how he had lived in a shadowed world where escape seemed impossible. He conveyed that he had been taken from a group home months earlier by a woman he knew only as Laura. She had approached him with food and kind eyes, promising a better life far from the crowded facility. Though Eli lacked the words to describe his fear, his trembling hands and quick glances toward doors told the story of a boy who had been carried away without choice. Through carefully guided sessions, specialists learned that Laura had kept him in the hidden basement of the farmhouse while moving between remote forests. He drew crude pictures of the tunnel beneath the house, the van hidden under tree branches, and cans of food stacked against damp walls. According to Eli, days and nights blurred together in the basement. He was given just enough to eat and was never allowed to leave unless Laura was certain the area was safe. She told him people were looking for him, but insisted they meant harm. For a child already struggling to communicate, her words must have felt like an unbreakable chain. When asked about the scratched-out man in the photograph, Eli's signs became shaky and confused. Eventually, investigators determined the man was not his father but someone Laura believed had betrayed her years ago. She claimed Eli carried the soul of her deceased brother, a delusion that shaped every decision she made. In her mind, keeping the boy hidden was an act of salvation. Specialists recognized the dangerous blend of obsession and grief in her action. Her refusal to seek help or allow anyone near the child suggested a plan built on control rather than care. Further investigation confirmed Eli's account. Records from the group home showed that a woman resembling Laura had volunteered briefly as a part-time caregiver before disappearing. Surveillance footage from weeks before Eli was found captured a blue van idling near the facility late at night. Authorities believe she watched the property for days before luring him away. Her forged documents and careful evasion showed planning and patience, not a random act. Despite a nationwide alert, Laura Denton remained a step ahead. Search teams scoured forests, abandoned buildings, and rural highways, but no trace of her surfaced. Witnesses occasionally reported a woman matching her description in distant towns, yet each lead faded into dead ends. While Eli slowly began to heal in the care of a patient foster family, the woman who once claimed to protect him vanished into the vast wilderness. Her motives, born from grief and obsession, left a haunting reminder of how a single belief can twist into something dangerous, leaving behind a child who survived not by chance but by quiet resilience.